दर्श्या ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मायं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकां वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुन् श्रीयुतापदा कमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं स्वावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितं हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपीशा गोपिका घाता राधा घाता नमोस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुस्तुते देवी हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण हरे
कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे
हरे राम हरे राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण।
Thank you very much, Ashwini. Hare Krishna. So today among us, His Grace, Hare Bol, Shyamanand Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. I am Parth Prem Das from ISKCON Eldoret. Kritika Mataji is a little busy, and we are on chapter 6, Dhyan Yoga, and text number 2. So already we read the Mangalacharya. Now hand over to you, please, Prabhu. You can continue, please.
Hare Krishna, thank you. I'm sorry I was a little late.
Yes, Prabhu.
But we have, in England, we have a saying, better late than never. Hare Krishna. So we're going to discuss 6.2 today.
Yeah.
Sixth chapter. So as Prabhu was saying, it's Dhyana Yoga. So I want to just connect it a little bit with, we'll chant the verse together, then I want to connect it a little bit with what has gone on in the 5th chapter, because the two are intimately connected. Then we'll talk about the purport. So we did the Sanskrit together.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yasaniti praho. Yogam tam vedi pandava.
Yogam tam vidi pandava.
Nahya sankalpo.
Nahya sannyasa sankalpo.
Yoga bhavati kaschana.
Yoga bhavati kaschana.
So we'll do the word for excuse me, we'll do the word for word together. Yam.
Yam.
What?
What?
Sannyasam.
Sannyasam.
Renunciation.
renunciation.
Iti,
Iti,
thus.
thus.
Prahu,
Prabhu,
they say.
they say.
Yogam,
Yogam,
linking with the Supreme.
linking with the Supreme.
Tam,
Tam,
that.
that.
Iti,
Iti,
you must know.
you must know.
Pandava,
Pandava,
Osana Pandu,
Osana,
na,
na,
never.
never.
He,
He,
certainly.
certainly.
Sanyasta,
So,
without giving up.
without giving up.
Sankalpaha,
Sankalpa,
desire for self-satisfaction.
desire for satisfaction.
Yogi,
Yogi,
a mystic transcendentalist.
a mystic transcendentalist.
Bhavati,
Bhavati,
becomes.
becomes.
Paschana,
Krishna,
anyone.
anyone.
Okay, so Prabhupada renders the following translation. What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. O son of Pandu, for one who can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. You can repeat after me. What is called
What is called?
What is called?
renunciation?
Renunciation.
You should know to be the same as yoga,
You should know to be
the same yoga,
the same as yoga,
or linking oneself with the Supreme.
or
or
linking
linking
oneself with the
with the
Supreme.
Supreme.
O son of Pandu,
O
Ocean
son of
of
Pandu,
for one can never become a yogi
for one can never become a yogi
become a yogi
unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification.
unless he
he
renounces
renounces
desire
the
for
desire
the sense gratification.
Okay, I'm going to wait for the purport because I want to connect a little bit with what's happened in the 5th chapter and also talk a little bit about the first verse, and then we'll do the purport if no one minds.
Yes.
Yes, yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so at the end of 5th chapter, we found that there are 2 verses, not quite at the end, 2 verses, 1 verse before the end, verse 27, 28, where Krishna gives a summary of the Ashtanga Yoga process. I just want to read those 2 verses. 28. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the 2 eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So here, 5th chapter, which you've just finished studying the 5th chapter. 5th chapter is pretty much how one can come to the liberated platform through Nishkama Yoga. And I'm going to explain the term in case we haven't recently explained the term so everyone can understand it. Karma means activity. Nishkama means not desire. Performing activity without personal desire to link with Krishna, Niskam Karma Yoga. So therefore we find at the end of the discussion of the 5th chapter that one can come to the liberated platform through this practice by working as one is obliged, but at the same time renouncing the fruit of activity. So then Krishna is giving a summary in these 2 verses I just read to show that the same thing can be achieved through the process of Ashtanga Yoga. In other words, to come to the liberated platform. It can the liberated platform can be achieved through Nishkam Karma Yoga, and it can also be achieved through Dhyana Yoga, which is the meditative process. And actually, in the purport, Prabhupada actually lists the 8 limbs of the process, beginning with Dhyana, then niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. These are the eight limbs or the 8 angas of the Ashtanga Yoga process. So through this process or through the Nishkam Karma Yoga process, one can come to the liberated platform. So that is the background here. And then also when we look at the first verse of 6th chapter, the Personality of Godhead said, one who's unattached to the fruits of his work, and who works is obligated, is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Because again, this is 3rd time Krishna is making this point, actually, 3rd time. You see, Krishna does not recommend giving up work. Over and over again, we find this principle is there in Bhagavad Gita. At the beginning of 3rd chapter, it was there. Beginning of 5th chapter, it was there. And now beginning of the 6th chapter, the same thing. Because we are used to working. You cannot give up work unless one's heart is considerably purified. God makes the point in many places that if work is given up prematurely, one will simply meditate on the objects of sense gratification. So here, this is the point, actually. In the verse we're studying, you see that point comes out very clearly. It announces the desire for sense gratification. Not only should work form Ashtanga Yoga, not only work has got to be stopped, but also the desire for sense gratification has to be stopped. Because one can stop the external work, but one can still have the desire. That's what Krishna mentioned in 3rd chapter when he discussed it, when he talked about the Mithyacha, the one who is a pretender. He's given up work, or he wants to give up, wants to renounce work, but when his heart is not pure, and therefore he deludes himself. Inwardly, he meditates on sense gratification. So this is the point that Krishna is making very strongly here, is one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. And also Krishna is making the point that sannyas and this business of sannyas on one hand and yoga on the other achieves the same platform. It's the same thing. Like that point was made in 5th chapter as well. But actually the one who pursues the path of karma yoga and one who pursues the path of sankhya yoga or jnana, the result is the same. But Krishna made the point actually that to perform work as devotional service and offer the result to Krishna is much easier because it's more natural for us. It's easier and it's safer. So Krishna's the same point here. And why Krishna is making this point here is because he's now going to launch into a detailed discussion about Ashtanga Yoga, how it works. It's a bona fide Vedic process, actually. Although one of the first things Prabhupada says in his purport says it's not possible in this age. Well, that many yoga schools teach it, many yoga schools do pranayama. So this process of Ashtanga Yoga is not really possible in this age because people don't have a steady mind, actually. The sages of Naimisharanya, they characterize the men and women in this age ways. They say they are short-lived, unlucky, quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, and above all, their minds are always disturbed. So one can practice the process, but one won't get the result really, because the mind is just too unbridled in the Kali. So he's making this point several times in Bhagavad Gita that one, first of all, must work in order to purify the heart. And how does that work? One performs dutiful work, the things one is supposed to do. And that is a Vedic context, and it also has a modern context. The Vedic is that the Veda actually gives work for different classes of people. If you stick around and you get to the 18th chapter, when the summary of the study of the first 6 chapters is given, Krishna gives that in the 18th chapter in terms of one's proclivity for work. The Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. One should offer that work, which is prescribed for one's nature, to Krishna as a sacrifice. And then actually that purifies. So in this way, that one can come to the liberated platform and actually to devotional service through one's work. So this is a theme which is there over and over again in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's important for us because even in the devotional process, we have to actually renounce the desire for sense gratification and work according to our duty. And actually Krishna is made very simple in this age. We simply have to perform the process of devotional service, leading with the chanting of the holy name. So these are principles which are at work in these first few verses. What is called renunciation, you should understand to be the same as yoga, because the goal is the same. Through material activity, one comes to the spiritual platform, and through yoga, which is linking with the Supreme, one comes to the spiritual platform. So they are the same. And they both require that one has to give up not only sense gratificatory work, but also the desire for sense gratification. You may give up the work, but you may still have the desire. So here we find that it's necessary for both these classes, one who gives up material activity and the one who's the yogi, have to give up sense gratificatory work, and also they have to renounce the desire for sense gratification. And this is what Prabhupada gets into in the purport. But I just wanted to lay this out very clear, because over and over again we find that Krishna is making this point about Arjuna. He's telling him your adhikar, qualifications to work. And we know that Arjuna's work, when Bhagavad Gita is finished, Krishna has narrated everything and tells Arjuna, so what do you want to do? Arjuna says, my illusion is now gone, and I agree to work according to your direction. So Arjuna is then, having heard Bhagavad Gita and understood everything, Arjuna then works as Krishna wanted him to. And Arjuna's work is to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. So if that's true for Arjuna, who's such a great soul, how much more is it true for us? And over again in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes this point, that he's not really an advocate of the Jnana Yoga process. He's not an advocate of it. It's difficult. When we get to 12th chapter as well, you see that comes through very clearly. But actually, it's an extremely difficult process, especially for people in this age. It's not really workable, actually. That is why the Yuga Dharma brought by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is this very simple process. It's like you could say that we are the youngest and most inexperienced member of the family. You know, if you live in a family situation, you'll know that the youngest child always seems to get the most attention, you know, because the parents know the older children are more established in their lives and therefore more self-sufficient. They don't need so much help. But we're like that young child. The Kali Yuga living entities are like that young child. They need a lot of attention from their parents. So therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving this process, chanting the holy name. No rules and regulations also. So that's a very important point. That has to be very easy for us, because these Vedic processes which are described in Bhagavad Gita are very difficult for us actually. Pretty much in this one, the Ashtanga Yoga process is pretty much impossible in this age actually. And you know, we can see that even if I used to do this when I was Gurukul teacher in Mayapur. When we came to this chapter, we would do a little experiment with the Gurukul students. We'd tell them, okay, so now you sit comfortably. And we tell them, okay, now you focus on your breath entering and leaving the nostrils. Actually, you can understand that this is a mechanical process, because Krishna says, he studied that, if you remember that, from the 4th chapter, when Krishna was talking about different sacrificial processes which lead to transcendental knowledge, one of the processes he gave was to drill the breath. It's called drilling the breath, because it's like a drill sergeant. You know, they march when you join the army, you get a drill sergeant, and what they do is they drill you. They put you on the playground. They make you march up and down like that, and they repeat it all the time. They're repeating it while you're in training, because they want to drill you, so that when the sergeant major says stop, then you stop. When he said by the right quick march, then you quick march. It's to drill you. It's an artificial mechanical process in one sense. Actually, later on in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna Prabhupada even says that in one of his purports, that these processes are for those who don't have the benefit of Krishna's devotional service. But Bhagavad Gita is bringing everyone in. It's not just for this age. We found out in the 4th chapter that Krishna was giving that knowledge to the sun god Vivishvan, which is 120 million years ago. Because when the Manvantar changes, all the demigods change as well. In the day of Brahma, there are 14 Manvantars. So Prabhupada does the calculation in the purport. So Bhagavad Gita is at least 120 million years old. So Bhagavad Gita is meant to draw in everyone, you know, but at the same time, bring them to the process of devotional service. So we find ourselves on pretty much the last rung of the yoga ladder. That's what we've been discussing. From the 3rd chapter, verse 10, where Krishna mentions the Karma Kanda process, then going through the stages of Karma Yoga, Sakam Karma Yoga, Nishkam Karma Yoga. When one becomes purified, then one develops a desire to turn internal and meditate. Now we come to the Jnana and Dhyana processes. So they're different rungs on a ladder leading to the yoga. And Prabhupada actually makes the point that we in order to understand and practice the Bhakti Yoga properly, we need to understand something about the other yoga processes. So we're coming to this final step. When one has been purified by work, the heart is purified of material desires, then one can give the work, and then one has to give up the desire, even the desire to enjoy the material nature in different ways. Because it's like my wife when she goes shopping sometimes. She says, enjoy with your eyes when you go shopping. You don't actually have to buy anything. You can enjoy through the mental understanding of, oh, it'd be nice to buy this, or it'd be nice to eat that. Because there's a gross practice of sense gratification, and there's also a subtle process of sense gratification. When you're enjoying the idea that maybe you could do it. Also, the desire for sense gratification, not expressed grossly. So she says that sometimes. She said, yes, you can just go window shopping and you can enjoy with your eyes. It's subtle sense gratification, actually. So even that has to be given up. So this is the point that Krishna is making. Unless that is given up, you can't be a yogi, actually. So the thing is, the question then is, as devotees, how do we deal with this? And Prabhupada is expressing so nicely in the purport. That's why I wanted to lay the groundwork before we discuss the purport. Because Prabhupada is making the point in the purport that a devotee is both a yogi and a sannyasi, automatically, by the process of devotional service. Because as we go through this chapter, you'll find that over and over again, Prabhupada will tell us we can't practice this process in this age. But if we practice the Bhakti Yoga process, it's automatically done. The yoga ladder is a bit like, I don't know if there are tall buildings where you live, but we were in America at one time shooting the Abhay Charan series that our spiritual master made. In New York, there's the Empire State Building. It's a very tall building on the New York skyline. There are two ways of getting to the top floor. On the top floor, there's an observation gallery. You can actually go out and look, and you see the whole New York skyline. So there are two ways of getting to the top of that building. You can go up the staircase like this. You can go up the staircase, or you can get into the lift and you can press the button. So if you're intelligent, what will you do? That's I don't know, someone could unmute and answer for me. If you're intelligent, if you've got the choice of the stairs or the lift, what will you do?
The lift. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we go up in the lift. Why wouldn't you do that? So what Krishna is explaining in the first 6 chapters is a progressive stepwise process, starting at Karma Kanda, which is more or less, you could say it's religious sense gratification. Because we've explained this before. Krishna has got a problem because when we come to the material world, we want to enjoy the material world. So Krishna has to trick us into spiritual advancement. And that is done through the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. That you get what you want, but you get a little bit of spiritual advancement while you're doing it. This is the lowest rung of the ladder. And then it goes all the way up the staircase. You go through Kanda, so many births doing that. Eventually you come to Nishkam Karma Yoga. You still have the desire to enjoy, but something is offered in sacrifice, then you get purified more. So gradually, it's like going up many stairs. But we have the benefit of simply get in the lift and press the button. Prabhupada makes this point in so many places, actually. And through the devotional process, then we get the result without having to worry about all these other Vedic processes. This, at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, tells Arjuna, give up all the Dharma. Bhagavad Gita is full of Dharma, actually. Different Vedic processes, different Dharmas. And Krishna says, just give it all up and surrender to me. So this is the intelligent thing to do. Okay, with this background now, we'll take a look at the purport. So I'm going to read from the purport. You can follow along with me. Real sannyas yoga or bhakti. That's see, because sannyas yoga, sannyas means to renounce. You know, there are 4 stages, there are 4 ashrams, and there are 4 varnas in the varna ashram system. You know, you can be a varna or a kshatriya or a vaishya or a shudra, and within that those parameters, there are 4 stages of life. There's student life, what we call brahmacharya. There's grihastha life, which is married life. There is varna, is retired life, and then there is sannyas, which is renounced life. So in the sannyas ashram, actually, one renounces material activity. You know? So this is why Prabhupada is saying sannyas yoga or bhakti means one should know one's constitutional position as the living entity. Because if we understand that, then things become much easier. What is our constitutional position? It's like whatever country you're living in, your constitutional position is that you are a national of that country. And if you're in a foreign country, it happens, you can go to your embassy and they will take care of you. Even though you're not at home in your own country, you can go to the embassy and they'll take care of you because it's like being in your country. It's because you're not a resident, a national of that particular country, you can get that protection. So that is your constitutional position. That for me, I'm English. I'm living in South Africa, but I've hung on to my English passport because it's a better passport than the South African one. So, you know, we have a constitutional position based on who we are. The material one goes with the body. You know, you're a Kenyan or an Indian or a South African or an English. But when we consider our constitutional position as a living entity, we're actually a part and parcel of Lord Krishna. That is our constitutional position. We should understand that. We're not actually of this material world. So that is the first thing to understand. What is our constitutional position? When we understand that, actually, then we know how to act. This is what Prabhupada is saying. Real sannyas yoga. Because there's sannyas yoga and there's real sannyas yoga. Real sannyas yoga, Krishna has made the point many times. Actually, in the previous verse, this is a nice point. Krishna is making the point here that there's a real sannyasi and there's one who's not quite so real. Unattach the fruits of his work, and who works is obligated, is in the renounced order of life. And he is the mystic. That is the real renunciate. What Prabhupada is calling in this verse, the real yoga. The real sannyas yoga is not to renounce material activity. The real sannyas yoga is to do your duty and be detached from the fruit. And it's interesting what Krishna is saying here in this first verse. Not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Because actually in the Varnashram system, those who take sannyas are usually the Brahmanas. Usually, and they have occupational duty. There are 6 things, 6 activities of a Brahmana. There's Patana and Partana, there's Yajana and Yajana, and there's Pratigrahi, and there's Dana. These are the 6 activities of a Brahmana. Yajana and Yajana. That means to study the script. Pratana and Partana. That means to study the scripture and teach the scripture. Yajana and Yajana means to learn the process of sacrifice or deity worship and to teach the process. And then Pratigraha means to accept in charity, and Dana means to give in charity. So if you're a sannyas, then, you know, they may be thinking, oh, no, I can give up my duty. You know, so the duty for a Brahmana is to light the sacrificial fire. They usually, in the Vedic culture, they would perform Agnihotra every day, actually. That would be their first activity, to perform Agnihotra. So a sannyas who's not a real sannyas in the sense of a yoga sannyas who's actually equivalent with the bhakti yoga process, he may be thinking, well, I don't have to perform my duty. And that's why Krishna says he lights no fire. Because one of the duties of a Brahmana is yajana and yajana, 2 of the duties. In other words, to the process of sacrifice and to teach it or perform it for others, you know, to help people with that process of sacrifice. So the real sannyas is the one who actually renounces the fruits of his activity and the desire for sense gratification, not the one who lights no fire. The one who lights no fire, he just keeps trying to give up material activity. So the point is made very nicely by Krishna in that first verse. So real sannyas yoga or bhakti means that one should know his constitutional position as the living entity and act accordingly. So just like this little finger of mine, or maybe we'll take the hand. This mine actually knows its constitutional position. Its constitutional position is part of my body, and it should cooperate with the body for its own good. So one hand has to do for cooperation with my body is to take the food and put it in the mouth. It is then in its, first of all, it knows its constitutional position and it's acting on that platform. It actually agrees to put the food in the mouth, because it knows, my hand knows if it puts the food in the mouth, it'll go down the esophagus, get digested in the stomach, and it will get the benefit of it. So this is what Prabhupada means when he says to know our constitutional position. It's a very important thing, because the trouble with the material world is it makes you think you have some other constitutional position, because we are superior nature. Krishna is going to make that point in 7th chapter. You'll come to that. Krishna is making this point in the 7th chapter that there is inferior nature, earth, water, air, fire, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Krishna says these constitute my separated material energies. And in the next verse he said, but there's another energy, a superior energy, which comprises the material, the living entities. So we are superior nature. We are not of this material nature. So when you bring something which is superior in contact with something which is inferior, what tends to happen? The inferior thing tends to be predominated by the superior thing. So when we come into this material world, that's what we naturally feel, that we're superior, and then we want to lord over and control material nature. That is the material way of thinking. That is when we don't understand our constitutional position. But if we understand our constitutional position, what are we actually? I'm eternal spirit soul. I'm part and parcel of Krishna. I am meant for Krishna's service in the same way that my hand is meant for the service of the body. And if the hand agrees to cooperate with the whole, then everything goes very nicely. Imagine if your hand decided, okay, I'm not going to put the food in the mouth anymore. I'm going to enjoy it myself. I'm not going to give it to the mouth. So that is kind of our position. Or Prabhupada also says, gives the example of watering the root of the tree. If the individual parcels whose constitutional position is always connected to the Supreme, if they agree to adopt that position, then actually everything goes. And actually it's more than the hand and the mouth for us. What happens is actually we enjoy unlimitedly if we agree to cooperate with the whole. And the whole is the Supreme Lord, is Lord Krishna. So real sannyas yoga or bhakti yoga means that one should know his constitutional position as the living entity and act accordingly. Act accordingly means not to act for our pleasure, but Krishna's pleasure. That's what's being described in this verse. Not to act for your pleasure, not to let the senses run away, to give up the desire for sense gratification. And then one comes into contact with the spiritual nature. But as devotees, we have the good fortune that by practicing devotional service, it happens automatically. Because in devotional service, we understand that our position is actually to satisfy Krishna's senses. That is the definition of service, actually. Rishikesha, Rishikena, Sevanam, Bhakti Uchate. That is actually the definition of devotional service. That we don't act for our sense gratification, but we act for Krishna's sense gratification. So that's cooperation with the whole. The living entity, I'm reading on, it's next sentence. The living entity has no separate independent identity. We have no separate independent identity. We may think we do. We wanted that illusion, so Krishna allowed us to come here to have a separate identity. But it's false. Because even in that separate identity which Krishna is allowing us to have, the supersoul is there, making everything happen. Actually, it wasn't for the supersoul, nothing would happen. The supersoul and then the material nature. Three doers. We analyzed that in the last chapter. The three doers in perspective. The living entity, the modes of material nature, and the Supreme Lord. Who's the doer, actually? They're all doers. The living entity is the doer. The three modes of material nature is the doer. And Krishna is the doer. But how does the whole thing work? It's not that Krishna, he says that I don't assume the pious or sinful activity, the results of the pious or sinful activities of the living entities. Because Krishna is not responsible for that. We're the doer because our desire sets the whole thing in motion. Then, as Krishna said in the 3rd chapter, the material nature, the modes are doing the activity, but it's overseen and sanctioned by the Supreme Lord. So the 3 doers and activity. Krishna is actually giving us that illusion. It looks as if we're doing. But Krishna says, if you think like that, you actually haven't understood. It's not like that, actually. It is only our desire, which is our hand in the doing. And if it wasn't for that desire, nothing would happen. But that is acting outside of our constitutional position. Our constitutional position is to act for the good of the whole, just like the hand we were talking about, or watering the root of the tree. If you water the root, the whole tree will be nourished. So this is what Prabhupada means. And he says we have to know our constitutional position. I am part and parcel of the Supreme. I couldn't exist without the Supreme. I was just reading a purport in the Bhagavatam recently where Prabhupada says that actually the living entity needs the protection of the Supreme under all circumstances, both in the conditioned and the unconditioned state. And Krishna even says, everyone's following my path in all respects. You've studied that verse, I think. He says, they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, whether we realize it or not. Actually, everyone is surrendering to Krishna. Some people are doing it involuntarily, and some people are doing it voluntarily. If it's involuntary, then you suffer. If it's voluntary, you enjoy unlimitedly. We were just singing that song the last month, no? Krishna is drowning the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy. So that is the choice. These are the only 2 choices. We try to enjoy in the material nature, or we gratify Krishna's senses. There's no 3rd choice, actually. And as aspiring devotees, we have to try to come on board to this idea that, to try to let go of the material nature a little bit and take on Krishna's devotional service. And the wonderful thing about that is you get taste. You get some taste by doing that, by chanting the holy name, by joining the devotees in kirtan, by tasting the foodstuffs which are offered to Lord Krishna, by studying Bhagavad Gita together, by taking the association of other devotees. We get that higher taste. Krishna's it's like a child who's walking. If you've ever seen that, when a young child is walking, everyone in the room will encourage the young child. They hold out their hands like this and they'll say, come, come, come. So that is what Krishna is doing for us, actually. By giving that taste of devotional service, Krishna is encouraging us, come, do a little bit more, come to me, like that. Krishna is actually egging us on like that. So the living entity is no separate, independent identity. We only have one identity. That is, we are part and parcel of Krishna. We are pleasure-seeking by nature. We're eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. This is our nature. And we are connected to Krishna under all circumstances, whether we realize it or not. The living entity is no separate, independent identity. He is the marginal energy of the Supreme. The word that's used in Sanskrit is tatastha. There are 3 energies. There's the internal potency, the external potency, and the marginal potency. Antaranga, Bahiranga, and tatastha. The word tatastha actually is very interesting. It comes from the word tata, which means the shoreline. So the shoreline at the beach or by the riverbank, depending on the level of water or whether the waves are crashing or not, the shoreline can be exposed or it can be covered by the water. So that is our position. We are between the internal and the external potencies. We can be influenced either way, depending on our consciousness. So it's up to us to choose, actually. We're marginal energy, so we get that choice. Am I going to go for Krishna, or am I going to go for the false identity? I'm this, I'm that, I'm some. Let me try and enjoy in the material nature. And we have sufficient experience. We know very well what this material nature is like, but we're still hopeful that the next few experiences will actually satisfy me. We're still hopeful. And we haven't really got so much experience of the spiritual nature, and therefore we're doubtful. Therefore, the process in this age very quickly gives you the higher taste. Even people who have no contact with the holy name suddenly hear it. Sometimes people start to dance, or people in general, they smile when they see the kirtan party because they have an innate sense that this is something spiritual. Most people actually have a positive reaction because deep down in their heart, they know this is something spiritual. So it's marginal energy of the Supreme. It can go either way. We can be under the control of the material nature, because that's Krishna's nature and we're very tiny, or can be under the control of the internal nature. There's no third choice, actually. That's all there is. So Prabhupada says, we're reading on, when he's entrapped by the material nature, he's conditioned. We are conditioned by the three modes. You think you're this, or you're that, or the other. And it's true to some extent, but the thing is, it's a temporary designation. It won't last. So it really has no value. It's only true for a very short space of time during this one particular lifetime. You know, the lifetime of Brahma, which is 311 trillion and 40 billion years, is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam as a flash of lightning in the expanse of time. And that's how long he's living, 311 trillion years. What to speak of the 60 or 70? I come from Christian background. It's said that in the Bible that you get 70 years and 10. The score is 20. So 70 years and 10 is 70 years. But we think it's, you know, the be all and end all. We don't realize actually it's just a tiny moment in time. And it's not who we really are. So in the conditioned state, that's what we're led to believe. What Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati calls the stupefying potency of the Supreme Lord. The stupefying potency means the material nature. It stupefies you. It makes you believe all kinds of things that are not true. So when he's entrapped by material nature, he's conditioned. And when Krishna conscious or aware of the spiritual energy, then his real and natural state of life. So that is our real and natural. What we're doing, we may think it's the other way around. We may think what I'm living in conditioned life is the natural way of life, and the other thing is alien. The other thing is actually something which I don't really know very much about and I'm not sure about. But actually it's the other way around. That is who we really are. But because we have our consciousness flowing through the body, through the senses of the body, we're so addicted to that. We're all material junkies, actually, by the way. I don't know if you know that. But we're so addicted to that, we think that is the real state. And actually, we have to be helped to go back into our natural state, actually a state of connection to the Supreme Lord. So when we're aware of the spiritual energy, then he is in real and natural state of life. So we're trying to be aware of that spiritual energy. Always engage your mind in and think of me, become me, for your obeisances to me, worship me, being fully absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. That is what we're trying to do. Therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all material sense gratification. So complete knowledge, this is what we're discussing here in this second verse. What is called renunciation? No, should be the same as yoga or linking oneself with the Supreme. That is knowledge. You get knowledge from that, actually. And if we understand that, then actually one renounces the desire for sense gratification. So therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all material sense gratification, or renounces all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. Because when we come into substantial contact with the spiritual nature, in contact with Krishna's transcendental nature, we realize it's such a waste of time. Actually, even in our conditioned state, we have some sense of that. We know, because we keep changing our activity. Why? Because one activity doesn't satisfy us. Therefore, we have to change it for another one. And that doesn't satisfy either. So therefore, we change it for another one. And we may even go back to the one we did before in the hope, but it never works out, actually. It never satisfies. So therefore, we keep changing from one thing to another. So that process is called sense gratification. And if we get a substantial taste of the spiritual nature, we begin to realize, actually, that it's a waste of time. And Krishna, and throughout with the discussions we've been having in these 6 chapters, over and over again is making this point. What is it? One who is a wise sage knows very well that these pleasures have a beginning and an end, and therefore as a wise sage doesn't engage in them, because he knows it's a waste of time, actually. It'll just pass the time. It's like they say that. In England, they have a brand of matches called England's Glory. I don't know what the matches are called where you live. Where we're living now in South Africa, there's one brand called Lion matches. But in England, they have this brand of matches called England's Glory. And on the back, they put these adages, these like well-known sayings, which are supposed to give you wisdom. So I remember this one as a boy. On the back of this one particular England's Glory matchbox, it says that worry is like a rocking horse. It passes the time, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Everyone knows what a rocking horse is, or a rocking chair. You go like this. It passes the time, but does it get you anywhere? It doesn't get you anywhere. So sense gratification is like that. That is what Krishna is trying to educate us about. Take up this bhakti process because it will give you, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, the taste for which we are always anxious. Let there be all victory for the chanting of this holy name of the Lord, because it gives us the taste for which we are always anxious. We all want Krishna. Some of us realize it and some of us don't. And we have experience that this sense gratificatory process doesn't really satisfy. So why don't we try going after because we know as well that they taste wonderful. The spiritual nature gives us a wonderful taste. We just have to become practiced at staying in that consciousness. That is achieved through Krishna's devotional service. You have to be like Maharaj Ambarish, engage in all 9 processes. Prabhupada says any one can make you perfect, but still we should try and engage in many of them as we can. So therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all sense gratification or renounces all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. Prabhupada repeating the point. Prabhupada does this a lot, actually. He'll make the point in several different ways because we only remember 15% of what we're told. The other 85%, we forget it. Even Krishna does that in Bhagavad Gita, actually. He says what he's going to say. The 2nd chapter is the contents of the Gita summarized. Then in the next 16 chapters, he says what he's going to say. And then at the end, he says what he said. That's the 18th chapter, the conclusion, the perfection of renunciation. So even Krishna adopts that policy. He repeats things to us. So this is the 3rd time we're hearing this, actually, You work according to your obligations, because that will purify you, actually. You work. Krishna's repeating the point many times. Okay, this is practiced by the yogis who restrain their senses from material attachment, to renounce all kinds of sense gratification. That is practiced. Now Prabhupada is referring to the verse, actually the last couple of verses. This is practiced by the yogis who restrain the senses from material attachment. That is the verses we've been looking at. That the yogi practices that. It's an artificial process, actually. The Ashtanga yoga process is mechanical. It is step by step. You have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. But as devotees on the other side, we have so much mercy. Krishna helps us as the other devotees. We have wonderful things like prasadam and the deity form of the Lord. We have kirtan. We have so many ways which Krishna is extending to help us. No? But in this process, this mechanical process, you have to actually pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. So Krishna made it so easy for us, actually. So this is practiced by the yogis who restrain the senses from material attachment. But it's not easy. We discussed the example of Vishwamitra Muni before, I think. His meditation after 64,000 years was disturbed by the ankle bracelets of one dancing girl from Lord Indra's kingdom. So that after 64,000 years, he was having trouble affecting the process. It's artificial. To restrain the senses from their objects is actually very difficult. But for devotees, it's very easy because we use our senses in Krishna's service. This is the point Prabhupada's going to make now. But a person in Krishna consciousness has no opportunity to engage his senses in anything which is not for the purpose of Krishna, because that is our goal. Rishikena, Rishikesh, Sevanam, Bhakti, Uchite, to actually engage our senses in the service of the Lord of the senses. And if we're doing that, then there's no opportunity for sense gratification to creep in. Of course, when we are practicing, when we're coming to that perfected stage, we're kind of halfway. We're performing some bhakti, but it's anishtita. It's not steady. We engage in Krishna's service sometimes, and we engage in sense gratification sometimes. But we have to work on pushing that balance towards the devotional side. Therefore, it's a practice. Therefore, in Krishna says in the 12th chapter, if you can't just fix your mind on me, okay, no problem. Then you follow the regulative process of sadhana bhakti, and you develop the desire to attain me in that way. So we are practicing. So practicing means when you practice, it makes perfect. So the idea we want to practice devotional service as much as we can, because guess what? When you go back to the spiritual world, that's all there is. There's nothing else. It's only Krishna's devotional service when you go back to the spiritual world. So now we have to practice. And Krishna's very kind. He gives that taste. He gives us the association of devotees, that association of his personal association in the form of his holy name, his prasadam, which is so merciful to everybody, you know? The association of the devotees, the association of the deity. Krishna has made it so easy for us. We just simply have to put some effort into adopting the process of devotional service. So, but a person in Krishna consciousness has no opportunity to engage his senses in anything which is not for the purpose of Krishna. That is our process. Therefore, a Krishna conscious person is simultaneously a sannyasi and a yogi. Does the two things together in one shot. He renounces material activities, but he's also a yogi because he's using his activities to link with the Supreme. So Prabhupada's making this point. We don't have to worry about either of these. They're both done automatically. The purpose of knowledge and restraining the senses as prescribed in the jnana and yoga process is automatically served in Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna's been describing those two processes. Use your work to purify me, then meditate to purify me. But a devotee doesn't have to worry about those two processes. Simply by performing devotional service, everything is done. You know, because this process which Krishna is going to describe in this chapter, after Arjuna hears it, he tells Krishna, look, this is not for me. It's too difficult. What to speak of us? If Arjuna is saying it's too difficult for him, what to speak of us? So we don't have to worry about these things. But it's important for us to know about these processes, to make our knowledge of Bhakti Yoga complete. Prabhupada actually makes that point when we get to the end of the yoga ladder. So the purpose of knowledge and restraining the senses as prescribed in the jnana and yoga process automatically served in Krishna consciousness. If one is unable to give up the activities of his selfish nature, then jnana of yoga are no avail. It's no purpose to it. If you can't give up the selfishness in your activities, those processes won't help you. This is why Krishna is saying here, you can never become a yogi unless you renounce the desire for sense gratification. So if you can't give that up, these processes are of no use. The real aim is for a living entity to give up all selfish satisfaction. That is what's keeping us in this world. It's difficult because we're addicted to it. But Krishna is so kind, he's made it easy for us in this age. There are no rules. I'm giving you my personal association in the form of the holy name, and there are no rules. You can even chant it in the bathroom. You can chant it anywhere. You got up and you haven't had your bath even, you can chant it. There are no rules to this chant. Krishna making it so easy. We simply have to give up this desire for sense gratification. And how we do that? We simply transfer the object. Instead of I, me, and mine, it becomes Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And we will enjoy automatically through that process. So we have to give up the selfish satisfaction, be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for any kind of self-enjoyment because it's useless and it doesn't satisfy. This whole business of trying to enjoy ourselves in the material nature, everyone knows it doesn't work so well. So actually, when we get that higher taste, then the lower taste of this sense gratification, this trying to enjoy, through the material nature, it becomes insignificant actually. It's automatically given up because the devotional service tastes so wonderful. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for any kind of self-enjoyment. He is always engaged for the enjoyment of the Supreme. That is the Krishna conscious process. What will please Krishna? That is what I'm going to do. One who has no information of the Supreme must therefore be engaged in self-satisfaction because no one can stand on the platform of inactivity. We have to do something. Krishna made that point in the 3rd chapter. You can't even do nothing for the blink of an eye because you're pushed by your nature. You will do something. There are 2 choices. We're going to do something. So there are only 2 choices. Is it I, me, and mine, or is it Krishna, Krishna, Krishna? So at the present time, as devotees, we're somewhere in between. It's not exactly all Krishna, 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 but it's not exactly all I, me, and mine either. We're somewhere in between. The trick is we have to advance from where we are. If we follow the process, it will work. Increasingly, we'll give up the I, me, and mine, and it'll be more and more Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And one day we'll wake up and we'll be in the spiritual world. And then we'll see that actually, even as we're going along, we see the process works. You don't have to wait till you go to the spiritual world. It's pratakshabhagamam damyam, Krishna says in the 9th chapter, 2nd verse. This process is the perfection of religion because you can see it happening in front of you. You can perceive it yourself. So we don't have to wait, but we're going to do something. We cannot be inactive. So therefore, let us more and more try to perform this devotional service. All purposes are perfectly served by the practice of Krishna consciousness. That is what we need convincing of. If we're convinced, we'll do it, but we need some convincing. Well, yeah, I'll do a little bit of, actually that as my time in the association of devotees goes on, this is something I'm realizing more and more. That, think we have surrendered so much to Lord Krishna. We think, well, if I look back, before I met the devotees, I've surrendered so much. But then also, as you go on trying to practice this process, you realize more and more that what I've surrendered is nothing. I've got so far to go. There's so much more I've got to surrender. But we shouldn't be scared by that, actually. We should take it up according to our ability, surrender a little bit more, If you're chanting 1 round, chant 2. If you're chanting 16, chant 17. Just to give a little bit more according to your capacity, and you become strong in that. Then you surrender a little bit more, because surrender is a process. It doesn't just happen overnight. It takes time. We have to learn to try to surrender more and more to Krishna's will and less of our will. And the more we do that, the more we'll enjoy, actually. Let there be victory for the chanting of the holy name, because it will give you the taste for which you're always anxious. Anyway, I've kind of gone on a little bit longer than I kind of wanted to, really. So I want to open for comments or questions, if there is. You can. I prefer if you talk to me. I don't like the type questions so much. I like it when devotees talk to me. If there are comments or questions, or I hope realizations as well, because it's wonderful if we share realizations about what we're hearing. We're getting to hear Krishna's personal word, his conversation with Arjuna. When we study it, hopefully there will be realizations in our hearts. This is what Krishna wants, actually. You're hearing my conversation. So what have you realized? So comments, questions, or realizations? Let's see.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Kritika
Krishna.
Mataji, you are there? Hare Krishna, Kritika Mataji.
He dropped
Maybe.
out.
Yes.
Anyway,
Hare
it's fine. It's fine if there are no comments or questions, but I'd like to give that.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna,
Yes.
Prabhu, can I ask one question? May I ask one question?
Yes,
Of course.
Yes, thank you for a very nice lecture, and appreciate your time. And I have one a question which is actually very difficult for me to understand. So I always try to seek that what is the best way. The question is that there are two parts of this question. One is basically that you mentioned that what is our constitutional position. Our constitutional position, we are a servant of the Lord. That is one.
Yes.
The second part of the question is that when we talk about which is also related to that, is basically like we are a spirit soul. We are not a body. Now these two concepts, when we are association with the devotee, when we are talking, when we are hearing like your lecture, then we realize that, okay, yes, this really works and this is there. The moment I stepped out from my house or from this, it goes off completely. So how do I rectify that? Because it's a very big challenge for me, very big challenge. So please help.
It's not just a big challenge for you, it's a big challenge for all of us. That we are trying to practice devotional service, but we are not steady. Our practice is anishtita. We're struggling with that. We're trying to become more and more steady. So the thing is, it's a question of practicing. First of all, it's a question of practicing the process to the best of our ability. That's the first thing. The more we practice the process, the more we will be in good consciousness. The more we will be able to step outside the association of devotees and remain Krishna conscious. Hearing and chanting in this respect is very, very important. To hear and chant about Krishna, about Krishna's devotees, about Krishna's activities as much as possible. Because when there's hearing and chanting, then there can be smaranam, then there can be remembering. And then what will begin to happen is that in situations where, we step outside the association of devotees, instead of the material nature gobbling us up and eating our consciousness, actually we start then to see Krishna in the material nature. And Krishna is helping us that in Bhagavad Gita, in 7th chapter and 10th chapter especially. Of course, we haven't got that far in this group, but we have to learn to see Krishna everywhere, actually. And Krishna is giving us a clue. We can, the more we hear, the more we associate with Krishna's conversation, the more things will stick in our minds. We walk outside after being in the building and we look up at the sun and we can remember Krishna's verse, in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. I am the light of the sun and the moon. It's a hot day, so we take a drink of water. So we can remember, oh, Rasoham Napso Kuntaya, Krishna says, I am the taste in water. So this is the trick. It's a bit like, sometimes I like to use this example, that if we have a glass full of water mixed with ink, and we pour clean water into the glass, eventually the ink will be washed out. But, if we just add a little bit of water now and again, it won't really change anything. So the trick is to absorb ourselves in Krishna as much as we possibly can. And then what will happen is that situations in our life, which would just gobble us up materially, we'll start to see Krishna in it, or remember a verse, or remember something a devotee said, or remember something Krishna said, or one of his devotees said, or something our spiritual master said. So it's a question of saturating our consciousness with Krishna in as many ways as we can, so that when we step outside and we step into the material nature, that we have enough Krishna consciousness that the material nature doesn't overwhelm us. Anyway, this is one way of looking at it. I don't know that part of Prem Prabhu. Is that any help?
Yes, Prabhuji, please continue.
Okay. Anyway, this is the thing we have to practice: hearing and chanting. Hearing is good. Prabhupada says the most important, but it's also good to share with others. Because otherwise, when you sit down for prasadam, we shoot prajalpa. But instead of when we sit down for a prasadam, why don't we tell the devotee nexus, Prabhu, this is what I read in the Bhagavatam today. And I was thinking, when we speak like that, then the other devotee will say, oh yes, I remember something, or this is when I hear this from you, this is what I think. We just have to be practiced whenever we can to connect everything with Krishna. And the more we do that, then the more the material nature won't overwhelm us. Is that all right?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You give a very right answer of the ink is actually now understood. I will try my best. Thank you very much.
Pour Krishna in as much as you can.
Yes. Now I got to thank you very much for enlightening. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
So we've reached 8 o'clock. If anyone else would like to question or comment, please do so. Just unmute yourself and speak to me if you want to. Or if you don't want to, that's also okay as well. But I want to give the opportunity.
Yes, please. Anyone have a question or any comment? Please give.
Realization.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe I would like to say something that I understood from the class.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ami.
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. So actually, what I take away from this class is that it's just not about giving up material activities like I'm not going to watch TV or I'm not going to do this, but it's rather about renouncing the desire of sense gratification, which can only be done through Krishna consciousness and engaging the senses for Krishna, because that's when your taste will change and you will just feel personally that you don't want to do it. It's not like yeah, it's not like I have to do this or that, but it's just personally feel like I don't want it. I just don't want to
Yes,
watch TV or yeah,
because I'm getting
just
something
taste and
better. Because
yeah,
when
yeah,
we perform Krishna's devotional service, it tastes better, and therefore automatically we feel like, now would I rather go dance with the devotees in kirtan, or do I want to watch TV?
yes.
I mean, which is more attractive? So that's what we have to
Dancing with
become practiced
devotees,
in.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
dancing with devotees is much more fun.
Yes. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. It's a
you.
very nice realization, Armin. Thank you very much.
Hare
Okay,
Krishna.
part of Prem Prabhu, I think we can dissolve
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your precious time. We are so grateful to you. It is our privilege. You are joined here, and very clearly you mention or describe the yoga ladder and what is the real goal and what is the duty of a sannyasi, like a Krishna devotee. He automatically a sannyasi. He no needed to go for the mechanical way to step by step. Prabhupada giving us very nice lift. It is high speedy lift. Like today's high speedy, everything is high speedy, so
Yeah,
high speedy lift. Yeah.
high speed lift, very high
Yeah,
speed actually.
high speed lift. So we can use that one and we'll reach this goal at least. Also, thank you very much, Prabhuji. Also, I thanks to joining all the devotee here. I thanks to His Grace Purundik Prabhu from Kishumu. Also, thanks Vivek Bharadwaj ji from Kampala. He's after a long time he joined here. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your joining. And also other devotees from Nairobi and UK. I thanks to all for joining here. And we are so glad for your joining and encouraging us to reading Bhagavad Gita every day. Hare Krishna. I request everyone, please open, unmute yourself and chant Hare Krishna mantra once, so that this is our gratitude to His Grace Shyamanand Krishna Prabhu. So please unmute yourself and join. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,